So, in my opinion, the most important thing, the holy grail in Scrum, is the done increment. And this talk is about to explain why I think this is, and hopefully to inspire you to change your thinking around the done increment. And I presume all of you have at least heard about the medieval story about the Holy Grail. So, to be honest, I had to look up the details by myself for preparation to this talk. So, I will briefly give you an idea. So, the story of the Holy Grail is about Percival. Percival is a young boy. He's living in the woods with his mother, and his mother is protecting him from all the evil of the bad world outside there. The reason for this is that Percival's father was a famous knight and he was killed in a battle, and also his brothers were killed in battle, so his mother tried to protect him to get not involved in anything related to knighthood or stuff like this. But one time Percival meets a group of knights in the forest, and to him they appear like angels. So he's very impressed by these people, and that's the moment where he decides he wants to become a knight. And so his mother cannot convince him otherwise, so he's going to the king's castle, and after winning a fight there, he becomes part of the round table and then becomes a knight. So after a while, he goes out to live through some adventures. He's getting to an older knight and get some education there. So one important lesson there was, Percival, you shouldn't ask so many stupid questions. So for a knight, it's a nice manner if you be quiet. And with this knowledge and with some skills in fighting and other things, he goes out and lives through some adventures. He one day arrives at a lake and sees the king of the fishers and meets him, and this is a very, very sick man, so he's really suffering. But he invites Percival to stay overnight in his castle, and in the evening, before they start eating, some strange things are happening. So people are carrying strange items in front of them, and Percival isn't really understanding what's going on there, but he's afraid of asking because he learned, okay, don't ask so many stupid questions. So he don't ask any questions. He goes to bed. The next morning when he wakes up, all the castle is gone. Nobody is there. He finds himself just lying in the forest, and then a young girl passes by and she explains he should have asked the right questions, and with those questions he would have relieved the king from his sufferings. But now he missed his chance. And this becomes then the story of his whole life. So the whole life of Percival now becomes addicted to the quest for the Holy Grail, to find it again and to relieve the king from his suffering. And he lives through several adventures, and with each adventure he becomes a better person. He fights for the poor, for the suppressed people, help them against the evils, and he becomes a better and better person. And finally he managed to find the Holy Grail, ask the right questions, and relieve the king from his sufferings. So that's the medieval story. And the question is now, what has this to do with Scrum? And I want to take you on a journey for a fictitious Scrum team, and we will see how they will go through their journey in becoming a better team, and how the done increment helps them as being a North Star for them to better improve themselves. So in the beginning, this Scrum team is led by a project manager. So project manager is talking to customers, he picks all the tasks and assigns it to single developers and says, okay, you have to do this and you have to do this. So normally he protects the developers from the world outside there, so they can just focus on coding, and the project manager is handling all the complaints from customers, all the pressure, and is organizing everything. So people are just there for coding. And yeah, it feels comfortable, people like it, and say, that's not too bad. So we have this small protected world. That's how it works today. But then one day they realize this comfort isn't helping us to develop further. It's getting boring. We're doing always the same stuff, so we're just finishing tasks and there's not really something real interesting to learn. And they decide they want to change the way of working. So someone heard about Scrum and said, okay, Scrum, that could be a nice thing. It would be great if we could work in such an environment. And the team decides to go this way and starts doing Scrum. So the project manager in first hand doesn't really like the idea. He's asking, okay, what's wrong? So didn't I serve you well? It was all good, and I thought I was a good leader for you. But then finally they convinced them that together they want to try the way to become a Scrum team. So the first step they take is that they form a team. They try to work more together and collaborate more. So it's no more so that tasks are assigned to specific people. It's more that together as a team they try to achieve their goals and help them together, share knowledge and this kind of stuff. And yeah, it feels nice to be part of a real team and not just working on your own stuff in your isolated environment there. So as the next step, there's the education part of the development team. Together with their product owner and with their Scrum Master, they're attending a Scrum training. And during the Scrum training, they learn a lot of interesting things. Many of the things they heard before about Scrum now start making sense for them. So, for example, daily Scrum, why is it there? Oh, it's helping collaboration, synchronization between the teams. So it's really, really important part of the team working together as a team. Or, for example, they learn about the retrospective, that it's really important to do this inspect and adapt part in Scrum to continuously strive for improvements, how you can improve the way you're working. And they learn about the done increment and the definition of done. So in the next step, what they do is they start a new sprint, and as they have learned about the definition of done, they create a definition of done and say, okay, now we try to get a done increment at the end of this sprint, and they're working on it and they try to fill their the definition of done they have created, and finally they go through the sprint. So they managed to do 4 out of the 5 PBIs they have forecasted for this sprint. So not everything got finished, but yeah, they feel quite confident that what they built during the sprint should be good, and they're really proud of what they did and say, okay, we fulfilled our definition of done, everything is checked. The one thing which we haven't finished, we don't show during the sprint review. So they go into the sprint review and, well, it is a disaster. So during the presentation, the application crashes multiple times. The stakeholders attending the sprint review, they're providing harsh feedback saying, well, we don't like the usability there, it's too complicated how you implemented this, and by the way, the performance, that's not acceptable. And so the team first is confused and say, wow, why? We had the definition of done. We fulfilled everything with what was in there, and still we are struggling, we are failing in our sprint review. And during retrospective, they had a long chat about the subject, and then they realized, well, they had a definition of done just because the trainer said you have to have one if you want to do Scrum. And what they did is they followed it exactly, but they didn't follow the idea, the philosophy behind it. So the definition of done, they realize, is something which should help the development team to meet the expectations of the stakeholders according to the quality of the product. And the sprint review showed them that their definition of done right now isn't doing exactly this job. Because they had to learn that the expectations were quite different from what they really were able to deliver. So, first thing the team does now is to change the definition of done and to integrate the learnings there. So they add, for example, some performance testings to make sure that the performance works better. They add more exploratory testing to test the application from a user standpoint to fix some of those usability issues and things like this. And so the team feels better now and say, okay, let's find out during the next sprint review how good our definition of done is now working, and then we will see where we can improve it further. So the next situation is in the story with Percival. There's this situation where there is a castle, and Percival tries to liberate this castle from the enemies, but when he tries, he fails, and only after joining forces with other knights together, they are able to liberate the castle. Our Scrum team has a very similar situation. So they have this hero developer. Maybe you know him. I think many teams have a guy like this, and he knows almost everything. He's able to answer all the questions. So if somebody wants something about the product or technology or whatever, he always goes to the hero and he has the right answer just in a second. If there is some serious problem, he's the one who is able to fix them very quickly. And so we have this situation that there's a very critical bug in the production system, and everybody on the team is relieved when the hero developers says, okay, I will take care of this, I will fix it. And I say, okay, whew, thank God. So the problem is that the hero developer is not able to fix it immediately, and the next day he gets sick. So the fix is stuck. Nobody knows exactly what's the current status there, how to proceed, and so it takes days until the team comes up with a solution, and then finally the hero developer returns, looks at the solution and says, hey guys, that's bullshit, so we have to do it completely different. So it takes more than a week to fix this issue, and you can imagine, as this is a critical production bug, customers are complaining a lot. And so during the retrospective of this sprint, the team decides that this is not a situation they want to continue with. They want to change something about. And so the idea they come up here is that they want to change things here and to switch the role of the hero from a specialist to an expert. So the difference there should be that the hero developer is not the only person doing the tricky, the difficult stuff, but he helps other team members to do the things. So by doing this, they can share knowledge between the team, and the team gets more independent from the availability of their hero. So, but you can imagine that's not the only challenge. So Percival helps a princess to get back her valuables, which were stolen by some thieves. She was not really taking care a lot of them, so she was really careless with them, and that's the reason why it was so easy for the robbers and chase them and gets back the valuables to the princess. The valuables of our Scrum team, that's their quality, the quality of their product and the quality of their code. So what I realize is that they are not taking enough care about this quality. So taking some shortcuts, trying to fix something very quickly and just put it into the increment at the end of the sprint, that they can say, okay, we are done now, and say, okay, we just make it better and clean up the mess later on. But as you maybe know, there is no later. So there's always important stuff to do, the next important task to finish. And that's what the team realizes, that finally this starts slowing them down. So the product backlog is starting filling up with more and more bugs. So the team realized they are working on so many bugs that the time they can spend on new features is decreasing over time. And it gets more difficult and more risky to do changes in their code base, because in some areas the code is a real mess. So what the team decides is to be able to deliver a real done increment. They change the definition of done to include some of those quality aspects. So they extend their testing efforts, and they introduce things like code reviews, real code reviews, where you not just see are there some rules fulfilled, but is this code really maintainable? Is this according to our quality standards within our team? And changing the definition of done is one part of this change. The more important part is that this changes the mindset of the whole team. So they take care more about their quality. They are not sacrificing quality for speed. They realize to be able to develop in high speed, they have to take their quality serious. And this shift in their mindset helps them really to become better and deliver real done increments. The next situation here is that Percival, to cross this bridge, has to solve a mystery. The knight over there lets him just pass after he solves the mystery. And for our Scrum team, the mystery here is, how should this work if we implement our software in short increments? If we add some functionality each sprint. So you can imagine if you stack something on an existing base and stack more on it and more and more and more, and do this over several sprints, the structure you finally end up with will be very fragile and will be very difficult to maintain. And that's the reason why they say, okay, we have to change something about this. And one of the development team members then comes up with the idea of emergent architecture. He says, okay, I read about emergent architecture. Maybe we should dig deeper into this detail. So the team decides to spend some time next sprint to invest in learning more about emergent architecture, and they realize that in an emergent architecture scenario, it's important that you apply some really important patterns and principles to your code to make it maintainable, and that's more important than to build a very specific architecture for the current solution you have to develop, because over time the requirements will change and your very specific architecture will not match exactly what you have built up there. So it's more important to use principles like loose coupling, to use dependency injection, to use clean code principles, which apply to every code base, and finally helps the team to add features over time and still maintain a good base, a good architecture for their application. Some of the challenges Percival is facing, they are so huge, it's not possible to solve them. So in those situations, often there's this guy Merlin, the wizard, coming into play, and he's helping Percival with some of his tricks. So, for example, a way to make himself invisible or stuff like this. So the important thing here is that Merlin isn't solving the challenge for Percival. He's not doing the job for him. The only thing is he provides some help, some support to make things easier for Percival. In our Scrum team, there are also wizards. At least some people think they are wizards. You can call them tools. So maybe you know situations like this. In our Scrum team's situation, some of the higher manager decides that the whole organization is now using a new DevOps tool. And if everyone is using this tool with all the automation magic behind there, then everything will get better. And so the tool is introduced, there are some rules which have to be applied, which have to be followed. And the team sets up everything in the tool. And after some time during the retrospective, one of the guys says, wow, I think we have slowed down since we're using this new tool. And the others agree and say, yeah, there's so many things we have to care about. There's so many things we have to implement, to do, just to satisfy the tool, just to get this working. We cannot focus on our real development work anymore. And so they decided that a tool which slows them down is really useless. It's the opposite you want to achieve with tools. And so they decided to cancel the tool effort. They convinced their manager to do an experiment to say, we stop using this tool, but we still want to get some automation which really helps us. And then they start to see what are their needs, their real needs for automation. Where are great opportunities for them where they can benefit from automations, and they build stuff really specific for their needs and for their scenario, and leaving out everything else which doesn't really help them. And finally, they introduced some tools into their process, but this time it's different. The tools they're using now, they're chosen by the development team. They are not introduced by some manager and saying, okay, we have to do this, and every team within our organization has to work exactly in the same way, so we can compare results or whatever is the reason behind. Each team has the possibility, the opportunity to do exactly what fits best for their needs. So the next challenge for Percival is he has to fight this huge dragon, and that he is not strong enough to fight the dragon, but finally he uses his creativity to find a solution to win this fight. And the same is true for our Scrum team. So the dragon of our Scrum team here is a big challenge, and it's the challenge: how can we deliver a done increment at the end of every sprint if we okay, thank you. So the dragon here is: how can we deliver a done increment at the end of each sprint when we situations where we are not able to finish every single PBI we have forecasted. So we have at the end of the sprint some unfinished work sometimes, and done means it's releasable, but it is not releasable if you have functionality which, for example, is not completely tested and you give it to your customers. So the first thing the team tries out here is to use a feature freeze. So they say, okay, 2 days before the end of the sprint, we are not starting work on new features, we are just finishing up what we have there. And sometimes it works good. Sometimes they have the issue that finishing up goes much quicker than they expected, but sometimes the 2 days are not enough. So they decided there should be a better way to do this with feature freezes. Next thing they're experimenting is using feature branches. So to have version control to isolate those features and just integrate what is really finished. But the team then finds out that feature branches are also not the ideal solution, because the integration work is always an effort, and it also brings some risk with it at the very end of the sprint when you do all the integration work. So next thing, they are experimenting with our feature toggles. So where you can turn on or off features by configuration. And they find, okay, that looks promising. And after a while, they even start using those feature toggles to do incremental rollouts. That means they are not providing new versions to the whole crowd of their users, but start with a small part of their users, and then when they find out that there are no problems, they increase the number of users using the new feature step by step until they cover the whole user base with it. Finally, Percival, after living all through these adventures and after becoming a better person, he gets a second chance. He finds the Holy Grail again, and now, being a different person, he's able to ask the right questions. And after asking those questions, the Sovereign King is relieved, he can die, and Percival becomes the next keeper of the Holy Grail. For our Scrum team, the situation is that they're sitting in a sprint retrospective and they're looking back over the last couple of months. And one says, do you remember those days before we used Scrum? Where everybody was just focusing on his own tasks, where everybody is trying to finish his own stuff, and then if not everything worked well together, there was all this finger pointing, everybody was saying, it's not my fault. We didn't have a focus on on making our customers really happy, delivering a product which really helps them. We were just focusing on doing work. And look how different it is today when we use Scrum, when we're doing this framework, we use all the mechanics in it to become better into delivering a done increment. And someone says, yeah, that's true. This was a terrific journey, and I never want to go back. And after some discussion, someone asks, okay, what was the driver of this change? What was our North Star during this journey? The thing which helped us to discover all these new opportunities, to discover how we could improve the way of we are working. And then they realize this is the done increment. Most of the achievements the team realized during this journey was driven by their quest to achieve a real done increment, are not being weak on this, not having weak excuses and just saying, well, that's good enough, let's just state it done. And they using a real definition of done. What I see some Scrum teams doing today is they're using done by definition, which means at the end of the sprint they say, okay, what we have now, that's done. So they define it as done. And hopefully I could inspire you with this talk. Maybe you see the done increment now in a different light, and hopefully the done increment will help you to shape your journey in your quest to become a better development team and to work better to satisfy your customers' needs and build great products for them. So just to give you an opportunity to remember this story, I have those little grails with me. So if you leave the room later on, don't forget to take one home and put it on your desk and think back on this talk and on the importance of the done increment. And there are some steps into this as well on the paper you can read to remember which things you might consider discussing with your team, where there might be opportunities for improvement. Thank you very much.